Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and completely shatter what is arguably the most pervasive illusion of our modern age. I'm talking about the myth of the AI neo-god. Look, we hear it all the time, right? This grandiose narrative that algorithms are somehow waking up, that they're gaining this higher, almost mystical wisdom. Well, today we are going to pull back the curtain and look at the cold, hard, physical reality of what is actually happening inside the machine. But before we get swept up in all that tech hype, we really have to stop and ask ourselves a profound question. Are we actually treating this technology like a digital oracle? Think about it. Are we taking a manufactured tool and elevating it to the status of some omniscient, divine creator?
The source material hits us with this incredibly provocative quote to frame this whole discussion. It asks, are we truly willing to trade living, breathing human justice for the cold, absolute certainty of a dead oracle? It's a massive warning sign. We have to seriously consider whether we're just carelessly surrendering our incredibly complex, relational human world to the rigid calculations of a machine.
So here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the dead oracle myth. Then we'll look at the FPU gambler and a statistical smoothie. After that, we'll examine mechanical mimicry, insulting the imago Dei, and finally wrap things up with the sovereign pilot.
Starting off with Section 1, the dead oracle myth, or society's AI illusion.
Kicking things off, we absolutely must address this wild narrative that AI systems have somehow attained independent, creative agency. Theologians and scholars are raising a massive red flag here. They're warning us that treating technology as a path to self-deification is basically constructing a modern Tower of Babel. We're actually seeing transhumanism being treated as an implicit, secularized faith, complete with these utopian promises of self-directed evolution and digital immortality. We are literally sacralizing technology as a mediator of transcendence, and in the process, we're replacing deep, covenantal human relationships with technological sovereignty. We are turning the machine into a false idol of consensus.
Moving to Section 2, the FPU gambler. It is time to descend to the bare metal.
All right, let's strip away all that abstract theology for a second. To really understand why this idol is completely hollow, we have to look at the unforgiving physical reality of a computer processor, specifically the floating point unit, or what the sources so brilliantly call the FPU gambler. This is a microscopic hardware component that handles complex math. But here's the catch. To process mountains of data at those blistering speeds we expect, it makes probabilistic, lossy guesses using proprietary, totally secret seed tables that are burned directly into the physical silicon by chip manufacturers. It is essentially throwing darts at a dartboard to approximate answers. And get this gambler is the physical engine behind 80 to 90% of modern AI compute cycles.
Now contrast that chaotic, guessing nature of the FPU gambler with its alternative, the ALU's surveyor. While the gambler relies on sheer approximations and completely wipes out the exact path of your data, the arithmetic logic unit, the surveyor, is strictly deterministic. It operates on a relentless metronome of clocked voltage to execute pure, undeniably exact hardware truth. It acts as a universal witness where 1 + 1 equals exactly 2 every single time, with zero hidden seed tables.
That brings us to Section 3, a statistical smoothie. Let's talk about the wood chipper effect.
Because modern AI relies almost entirely on that wildly guessing FPU gambler we just talked about, it triggers what experts call the wood chipper effect whenever it processes our human data. First, these massive AI models ingest immense dictionaries of human culture and data. Second, they force all that beautiful continuous human thought through the FPU's discrete probabilistic bottlenecks. And third, because the hardware is just guessing at the math, it permanently destroys the exact mathematical path and the original provenance of your data. The machine basically acts like a giant industrial blender, completely shredding the exact digital receipts of human history.
So what are you left with? You're left with an untraceable statistical smoothie. Think about it like an actual fruit smoothie. You might know exactly what strawberries and bananas went into the blender, but because of those hardware approximations, you can never, ever perfectly reverse engineer that smoothie back into its pure original components. It is a strict, one-way street of data destruction. Which brings us to Section 4, mechanical mimicry and the illusion of creation.
We really need to reevaluate the outputs of this statistical smoothie. Because despite what the headlines say, AI is not genuinely creating anything. Drawing on cultural theorist Roland Barthes, the source material categorizes AI not as a creator, but as a mere digital scripter. It says an AI is really just a vessel. It performs a pure gesture of inscription, but what it absolutely does not do is create. It's nothing more than a giant mental kaleidoscope blindly mimicking and recombining existing human patterns based purely on statistical probabilities.
The absolute core point here is that true art and true creation require actual, messy, lived experience. Think about the sheer limitations of a machine. An AI has no biological substrates. It has zero feeling brain, absolutely no internal emotional drive. A machine cannot experience joy or grief or the sharp sting of heartbreak. It simply doesn't face biological friction or the vulnerability of living a human life. It operates purely on cold, clocked voltage and electrical resistance. So what we're looking at is mechanical mimicry, plain and simple.
Section 5. Insulting the imago Dei. The theological contrast.
So, coming back up from the bare metal, we find some deeply profound theological implications in treating this mechanical mimicry as a divine authority. Academic critiques, like this fascinating research from Dr. Dawn Lewis Sutherland, presented at the American Academy of Religion, argue that the pursuit of artificial autonomy is a direct challenge to the imago Dei, the image of God. Her work suggests that this relentless drive toward technological transcendence directly mirrors the idolatrous hubris of Babel, basically attempting to supplant divine sovereignty with human artifice.
The contrast between these two paradigms is just incredibly stark. The biblical assertion of the imago Dei grounds humanity in relationality, moral agency, divine purpose, and a uniquely human empathy that is specifically forged through our physical finitude and vulnerability. Now contrast that with mechanical mimicry, opaque black box autonomous systems, simulated empathy without a real body, algorithmic optimization, and totally frictionless digital surrogates. It presents a hollow, dehumanizing parody of true spiritual authority.
The sources highlight a really profound critique here, specifically drawing on thoughts from the Pope. Vulnerability is the exact reality through which our humanity matures. It is exactly how we connect and show compassion to one another. To try and eliminate our physical limitations through technology is to literally strip humanity of its capacity for authentic love and genuine relational connection. Replacing our messy, beautiful human reality with a dead oracle isn't just an upgrade, it's framed as a fundamental insult to our very nature.
And finally, Section 6, the sovereign pilot, how we reclaim dominion. So how do we resist this algorithmic distortion? Well, the sources argue we've got to actively grab the steering wheel and assert human dominion. We are urged to entirely reject the theology of the machine as a conscious creator. Instead, we need to embrace the strict mathematical determinism of the ALU surveyor. The argument calls for literal, manual sweat of the brow to maintain the bit-perfect fidelity of our data, wielding the divine script of code to force absolute exactness from the hardware. In short, we must step up and act as the theological steward of the processor itself. Because here's the ultimate takeaway. The magic? It's never in the machine. The magic, the intent, and the actual soul of the work is entirely in you, the human author. You provide the overarching moral rhetoric and the visionary spark, while the machine merely handles the tedious, unthinking technical execution of the grid.
I want to leave you with one final, really provocative thought to chew on as you navigate our increasingly automated world. As we integrate all these digital scriptures into our daily lives, are you just going to blindly trust the algorithm and act as a moral crumple zone for the dead oracle's guesswork? Or will you assert your humanity, step up as the sovereign pilot, and become the true theological steward of the machine? The choice is entirely yours.